Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of What's My 100%. I was about to say good morning because it's 6 a.m. here because, you're a girl. I tend to get going when I've got a little bit of that energetic juice that I often have in the morning, but it could be any time wherever you are. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. But I'm feeling excited to record this episode. A friend and someone that I've been connected to for several years wrote me and was asking a question, but she was like, this could be something that I think could be a good podcast topic because I know I'm not the only one who sits with this thing that I've been sitting with. And so I was grateful to her for the idea because I think that it's potent, the conversation that it sort of stirs within me as I read her question. And I'm excited to talk about it because it feels in alignment with so much of what I feel really moved to do in the world in this moment in history and the conversations I feel kind of obsessed with having. So let me just hold on and read the question, and then we'll go from there. But the question was, I wanted to ask about the idea of spiritual sovereignty in relationships, relating without ownership, and allowing full agency for both people, and then the biology of attachment. While I believe deeply in this philosophy of the sovereign self and the non-gripping of love, mirrors to grow and expand, our bodies are tricky today. Releasing dopamine, oxytocin, and other bonding hormones that can create the rumination, intensity, and I'm struggling a bit. And actually feel like a teenager at times trying to reconcile what I believe about relationships on a soul level, sovereign relating, with the very real biological pull towards attachment. And I love this question so much. Because, this is real, right? There are so many hormones and feel good chemicals and surges of dopamine and things that we experience when we fall in love and when we start to form an attachment to another person, which is often why I say that to me, codependency is the most socially acceptable drug of choice because it's sort of the drug, the hit of dopamine that we get that we in society are not pathologized for. There's no sort of moral implication for the fact that you are getting high on your supply of another person, right? And I think so much of, and I've spoken about this before, but in response to this question, I kind of want to reiterate because it holds true. So much of what I started to notice as I was sitting, certainly with couples and what they were telling me that they were grappling with, but also with so many of my individual clients, was the things that I had learned in recovery communities and when I was working in addiction recovery, and certainly just, on my own path of not having the release valve of drugs or alcohol in my life. What I started to realize was so many of those tools that I had accumulated to stay in my skin and stay with myself through intense discomfort, not only was something that we are never taught in our society. Like they don't teach you in school how to ride the waves of withdrawal and know that you will come out on the other side because you've done it before. That's not something we're taught. But if you have never been taught to do that, if you've never had the felt experience of staying with yourself in your skin, it can feel actually impossible in the same way that, if you think about someone who is in the grips of a drug addiction, they will do things that you like will blow your mind in terms of like losing their child because of decisions that they've made while they've been in the grips of an addiction. Like it's not something that makes rational sense. And yet the pull to have this thing that I believe I need for survival is so strong that you can't tell me otherwise when I'm in that space of what almost feels like you're enraptured in something, right? There's like a Jungian term for it that's not coming to me right now, but it's like you're caught up in this, it'll come to me later because this is what my brain does, but you're really sort of caught up in something that is outside of you in your rational mind. And I think we really underestimate the extent to which that is the case relationally, and that comes up just as strongly. And so it becomes, first of all, just like really important, I think, to name that the pull to come back to that attachment, that thing that I believe and have, sort of cultivated through this connection, this attachment to this person, a physiological response of I need this for survival. It becomes really important to name, like, yeah, you do, because the things that you are being flooded with in terms of the chemical response and what is happening on a biological level is just as strong as if you were attempting to withdraw from a drug, right? Big breath. Now, that being said, the beautiful thing about understanding this is understanding that there's a path to recovery. There's a way to approach it without believing that I have no option but to sort of be, in that space where I succumb to, like, I need this person for survival. You have to be in my life, because as long as I believe that to be true, I will make relational decisions that are based on maintaining the attachment and manipulation, and a lot of times self-abandonment and being out of integrity and all of these things. And it's not actually about that person. It's about the pacification of the discomfort, if that makes sense. Pacification word. I just decided it is because I just used it, right? But that's what's happening. Like, I'm using this person to make me feel better because these feelings are so overwhelming. And then all of a sudden we're in the space where it's not actually about this person anymore, right? And again, even as I say that, we have to hold ourselves with so much compassion because we are having that physiological response. Now, what do I do with that? I think there's power in the naming and in the understanding, right? I think there's power in the toolkit, which is something that I talk a lot about in terms of having your toolkit of things that you use that, like, that person connection could be a tool in your toolkit, but it is one of many, right? Like, and with clients, I like to sit down and have them really work on cultivating a toolkit of like 20 things that you can go to. And in this case, if you notice that it is tricky and I'm sort of caught up in that space where I feel such a strong pull, then I think it becomes like, how do I go to each one of those things before that person, right? And it becomes like building a muscle of staying in my skin. Now, a lot of times, I think as I say that and as I speak to these things, people will feel like that is me sort of advocating for a lack of intimacy and a lack of allowing that person to see us in the tender spaces of the vulnerability of, this is really hard for me. And maybe if I'm completely honest, it's not that though. But to me, the distinction and the differentiating factor is what I'm making that person responsible for, right? So I can certainly talk through my process. I can certainly say, I want to bring you in on this as something that I'm really working on, that I'm really attempting to build as a muscle within me, that I don't sort of use my relationship as the pacifier for difficult feelings, right? So there are going to be times where I'm just going to really notice that I'm feeling flooded and overwhelmed and really wanting to reach for you as the thing that makes me feel better. But because I want to like build within myself a sense of belief that I've got me, and I want to practice doing it while I'm relating to you, sometimes I might go to a yoga class. I might, go hang out with a girlfriend. I might go on a walk in nature. That would be preferable for like choice early on if that's accessible, right? But But naming that, and sometimes the intimacy can be asking for that person's buy-in, that person's support on, like, would that be something that, like, you would want to cultivate in our relationship dynamic? Because when it comes to what it is to relate from a sovereign place, I often say this is the building of a new paradigm. This is going to feel foreign for most of us in terms of what we understand about relationship dynamics, what we're entitled to, what we do with the difficult thoughts and feelings when they come up. Because let me just be so unbelievably clear, you guys, I am a human being. Today. But of course, in my relationship dynamics, I will have the same discomforts and stories I'm telling myself, and my ego wanting to, like, run off and sort of go with this, the least generous interpretation of what is happening because I feel afraid and my little girl is activated. Of course. And the difference is I have made it my responsibility to notice when that comes up and to be in conversation with myself about it, and to be so unbelievably compassionate with myself around why it's there. And I gotta tell you guys, it just feels like I get to love and experience relationships from the space of someone I get to be proud of, right? Because when our like, all those chemicals that we're talking about are sort of driving the bus, it makes us show up in ways that, like, really cultivate a lot of self-loathing, if we're honest, in the same way that when we've made ourselves a promise several times that I'm not gonna drink tequila anymore, whatever the negotiation is that we've made with ourselves. But when we sort of act out from that, you know, that place of our inner child who is activated and anxious and afraid, of course we get to do that. We get to be human. And I want to be so clear. I'm not saying to not allow ourselves to be genuine in the way that we're showing up, and not allow ourselves to be human. But I think what ends up happening so often is we start to meet partnerships and the person that we're relating to from a very young space within, right? And that starts to, if we continue to do it, right, over and over and over without ever taking responsibility for our inner adult, meeting our inner child and tending to them and being in relationship with them and soothing them, that starts to really, one, weigh on the way it feels to be in this relationship. It starts to just, this is like where we start to chip away a little bit at the extent to which relationships can be life affirming, in a place that I go to feel seen and experienced in my essence and all of the good things. We can't really do that when we're in that space of just attempting to pacify our discomfort, because when we're in that space, we can't actually even see the other person. We're just sort of in survival mode, right? So it's like we start to use that person like we start to use the drug, and it's not actually us in reverence and cherishing and experiencing a drug. It's like it's an object that I utilize for making myself feel better. And so that's not love, right? But when I can tend to that inner kiddo and, hold myself with some compassion, and then absolutely maybe bring that person, my partner, in on, yeah, this is like, I was really struggling and this is what was coming up, but here's what I did. Then that to me becomes the space where we can just start to cultivate something different in terms of the intimacy between us, because it's intimacy based on, like, where we're expanding and where we're holding ourselves accountable, right? And this is big to me, you guys, and it sort of leads me into something I've just been thinking about so much. And, I'm starting my first online couples intensive, which is an interesting thing because I've been working with couples for a while, primarily in private practice. But then whenever I do sort of any intensives or retreats, for whatever reason, I mean, I have a hint as to why, it ends up being primarily women who attend those intensives and retreats. Sometimes our brothers, come in, and I'm so grateful for when they do. But for the most part, it ends up being mostly women in the room. Now, this thing of bringing couples together and sort of in the process of the fellowship of community, witnessing the things that come up, I think there's a lot of power there in terms of the accountability that we bring to relationships. And it's the same accountability that we would experience in recovery rooms, because there's something that happens when we are witnessed in community, and when there's, in more ancient ways of existing, or even in indigenous populations, there's an understanding of this, that being witnessed by the collective really changes something within us. It is certainly a level of support, but it's also a level of accountability. And I think, if we bring it back to the recovery model, as much as sometimes I have struggled with aspects of, any of you who are familiar with like 12-step work or recovery work in that way, there's an aspect of like, if you use, or if you fall off in your recovery process, you come and you start over, and you tell the group, you allow yourself to be witnessed in the process of that reset, right? That starting again at day one and taking, in this context, a new chip or whatever it is, to signal like I get this fresh start. Now, there have been times where I've been like, oof, I don't love the shaming aspect of that. And I think there's a wisdom in it that sometimes even more now and even more in life, and what I'm understanding about community is, first of all, that group doesn't shame you. They are very much in that space of, you are loved unconditionally. We are here with you. We believe in you. That, anytime I've ever been in those rooms, that has been the energy I have experienced from the collective towards that person. That support of like picking you up when it feels like you've fallen down, and we got you. But also there's just, the feeling of not wanting to disappoint those who have believed in me and been there for me. I think there's actually power in that, in a way that we've sort of forgotten about in our hyper individualistic, nuclear family focused way of existing. And so, I'm saying all this in terms of this relationship intensive that I'm doing. What I have heard a few of the people who've talked to me about like contemplating joining say is that, and again, I'm going to gender this a little bit because it's so much around how we're socialized, but they have sort of shared that the husband in the dynamic, if it's a heterosexual relationship, is really, really hesitant to come and talk about their marriage dynamics in a group of people, which is so unbelievably understandable. One, because there's something that can be so activating, I find, for men in a society that has really taught them that to show any sort of vulnerability is, the equivalent of like annihilation, and like legit, it's that serious, right? That you have to keep that stoic, brave face of, I've got this. And if you don't, then you're somehow less of a man. I think that's been really detrimental to the collective psyche of our psychology, or collective psychology. I don't know. I think it's been detrimental to us collectively on so many levels, right? But also that there's just something really healing that happens when what we are grappling with, others can say, yeah, me too. We've felt that. We've moved through that. Here's what we've done. Here's what I've seen about myself. Just in case this is supportive, here's what I've come to understand. And we don't have a lot of that. And so circling back to the initial question, I think so much of why our survival feels so biologically linked to these pair bonds is because we're not spreading it around. We're not sort of in the space of, if this person isn't in my life, I know that I've got community, and I know that I've got so many other things that are life affirming and support me in feeling like the fullest expression of a self, right? Like all of it goes into this one human being. And of course, we feel a sense of panic if that attachment feels threatened, right? How could we not? It would be ridiculous for us to have any other response. So I think, one, we've got to really hold ourselves with so much understanding around why it feels that way. Two, we've got to understand a little bit that is by design, because we are so much less empowered when we're in survival states, you guys. This is just like, an understanding that so much of the reason for our moving towards deeper healing and sovereignty and an ability to stay with the truth of our power and our essence is because we are very difficult to control as a society when we are sovereign, when we know I've got my back, and I've got my community's back as well, because I am an actual self that is becoming and individuating and more whole with every day and every breath that I take, right? And it's not a point of arrival, and it's not a space where we shame ourselves for anywhere that we are not. That is in the space of like who we are becoming and who we continue to challenge ourselves and hold ourselves accountable for being. But I think in terms of the relational work and in terms of the relational psychology, so much of why we've put so much emphasis, from my perspective, on this is just the way attachment works, and you have to find a pair bond that you can settle into, and rest there in the security that once you've locked down the right person, they're not going anywhere, has really been to isolate us and to create dynamics where we are separate from the community that creates so much strength and empowerment and belief in what we're capable of. Because, when I feel like I can't do this myself, whatever the thing is, I can ask for support, and I can be held up by those who remind me of the truth of who I am when I forget. But if that's all on one person, then it starts to be a distorted form of a survival strategy from my perspective, right? So I hope that answers the question. And, I think something I'm feeling really a pull towards is just surrendering to the idea of, because, I was saying before that there's just so many ways that I've noticed women really feel more of a pull to come and be in conversation this way. And so I think there's something about how we as women are, the feminine. If we think about like any sort of healing that we do, we go to our feminine space, the internal space, and are in the contemplation with the divine within, right? Like I think someone says like nobody ever finds God on a good day. That might be a 12-step reference. I'm not sure. Maybe it was David Bowie. I don't know. But regardless of who said it, I think it is certainly like when we're at that point where we've tried everything other than something larger than ourselves taking the wheel, and that can be the larger part of who we are. That can be whatever our beliefs are, right? God, source, the universe, Jesus Christ, whatever that is for you. But when we're in that space where we finally, our human will has exhausted itself, and that can be, I've been struggling and grappling with this relationship dynamic and attempting to control this other person and create a sense of safety in our dynamic, and I'm exhausted and it's not working anymore, and it's sort of created a dynamic where the way I'm showing up, I'm not really proud of it, right? Then we go inward. We go into that dark, hollowed space of the feminine, and that is the space of surrender. That is the space of something else take the wheel. I'm open to another way. And so that feminine within is sort of like where we go first. And so I just feel like really cultivating this willingness to do this and tapping into some of these principles that have been the most supportive in my life. Yeah, I feel like a pull to create some sort of coven mystery school space where we really get to play with what happens when we come back into the space of surrender and we really allow the mystical and the magic that is accessible for all of us when we trust in ourselves enough to let go of the grip we're holding on to whatever the thing is. Yeah, I'm feeling a real pull for us to gather in community in that space of support. So maybe that's what I'll work on today. How to make that happen and what that could look like, because I feel like we've got to stop shaming ourselves. Like, first off, let's stop shaming ourselves for what we have been trained to do. And I think it's important to name that. So as we're talking about the biological response and the psychology of how we respond to this need for attachment, there are powers that be that are well aware that we are going to have this response, right? And again, it keeps us sort of easily controlled and out of our power source, our power, like the center within of the knowing who and what we truly are. And so this is where we have to like tap into those spiritual tools, those ways of coming back home to ourselves and back into that space of the inward focus when I want to find my survival outside, or my survival is not the word. When I believe that my salvation, that's the word I couldn't find, when I believe that my salvation exists outside of me. And so it's twofold, which I think is really beautiful as we bring it back to where we started the conversation around. This is so, to me, this question is aligned with the way that I frame or understood recovery work, in that there's a two-prong way of meeting this that we have to do work around whenever we're in the space of staying with ourselves. And that's one, there's some fires we have to sit through that nobody can accompany us on, right? There's some, certainly we can continue to call someone and have them stay on the phone with us. But eventually, if we don't ever show ourselves on a physiological level that I can ride the wave of discomfort and I am still here and I am okay, then we won't believe it's possible. But I'm telling you, once you've ridden one of those like massive waves, it's like if you're a surfer, like, those surfers that ride those waves that are like, you see them and you're like, how are you alive? They're so big. But it's like you ride that wave and you show yourself what you're capable of. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. And I think that is very similar to the felt experience you have of once you've ridden an emotional wave that you didn't believe you were going to come out on the other side of, or once you've experienced a heartbreak that you legitimately thought might kill you and you've come out and you're still here and you're still breathing, you've shown yourself like, I can do anything, right? And it's not that I won't ever have the experience of like, oh, I'm struggling, but we get to tap back into the moments where I have ridden those waves and remind ourselves, I've done this before, I can do this again. I have tools in my toolkit, and this person is for me to experience and pour love into, not to extract from, but to pour so much love into and to be inspired by and to journey side by side for as long as it is in alignment. But they are not my salvation. They can't be that. That is making another person my higher power, and that is far too great a responsibility to put on any other person. And so if that's what I believe to be true, then how do I tap into the tools that I've cultivated, that I know that I have? And I think it's important to have that toolkit ready, right? So for me, my toolkit is like a hot bath or getting out and going on a hike, if I'm really struggling, like those will be my, like, I do that first. I will meditate. I will pray. Like, actually, prayer might be before anything, but whatever your tools are that are like that actually helped. That was supportive. You got to tap into those tools in those moments that you're struggling, and it becomes like building a muscle. And, I had a mentor say once, like, whatever the thing is that your ego mind wants to draw you back into, it's sort of like doing push-ups, waiting for those moments where you haven't been strong in your spiritual practice, right? So this is why I believe the ritual and the continuous process of coming back every day to meditation, to listening to spiritual teachers that I feel really held and supported by, or to get into nature and to connect and plug into the source of the larger aspects of our essence. Those things can't be negotiable if we want to be in right relationship with our own sovereignty. I said what I said. Like, that's actually something I have become so unbelievably clear on within myself. When I am not doing those things, when I am not in the practice of whatever it is I know that I need to be doing and in right relationship with, to feel like the most honest version of myself and the most integrous and, who I want to be and how I want to show up in the world, I will fall back into those patterns of looking for something outside of me to make me feel a little bit more whole. But when I am really strong in my spiritual practices and in, meditating every morning and taking good care of myself, even when I'm a little like, oh, I don't feel like it, but let me go do something that's going to be really nurturing to me and I know will make me feel better, then all of a sudden I feel less of an urge to reach for something or someone outside of myself to get that surge of feel good, to make me feel better, or to alleviate the overwhelm that I'm sitting with, right? So that's the personal responsibility piece of our sovereignty. Like, I have to do the things that I know to do to make me feel better when I'm struggling in this human experience, as I and we all inevitably will, because we came here to be in it and to show ourselves what we're capable of again and again and again, right? All right, you guys. So I pulled a card from, this is one of these OG decks. This is the Light, you see it on YouTube, the Light Seers Tarot by Chris Ann. And I think I just love it because it was one of my first tarot decks. And the one that I pulled is the Knight of Wands, which I love. And it is charisma, passion, spontaneity, pursuing your dreams, fast energy, enthusiasm, courage, taking inspired action, the pursuit of adventure. Love those keywords. What have you been dreaming about? The Knight of Wands gallops in and out of your reading with messages of adventure, of impulsivity, and of bravely pursuing the things that inspire you the most. That passion project you've been tinkering with, that drum circle you've always wanted to join. Allow spontaneity into your choices and gift yourself the freedom to shift your reality to match your desires. It's okay to crave new things and to run with the wind when you are feeling charged up about an idea. Go with it. Allow this high-spirited energy to rush in and incite a wildfire of positive momentum. Fan the flames and leave your energy for the long haul. Leave some energy for the long haul, excuse me, tonight. Make your passion work for you while whooshing yourself towards success. I love that. And then the poem, the little phrasing at the end is, in pursuit of the imagined, I manifest this fire with the infectious feelings of inspiration. See, this is why I love pulling these cards, you guys, because it might be a little like, Dené, why are you always pulling those cards at the end of the podcast? And here's what I think just happened for me and why after I meditate every day, I pull a card to get just a message and some sort of moment of connecting with something larger, with spirit, right? And just now, as I was reading that, I was reminded that the other thing I think it's important to remember is that so often when we're in the space of really reaching for someone else or feeling like we need this person right now to be okay, one, I think that that ends up being a way that our ego mind is distracting us from something that we aren't wanting to be present with within ourselves, right? And that can just be like a way that we procrastinate, a way that we deflect and are thinking about something else. And we can do that for a while, like sometimes months, sometimes years. But, asking myself in terms of, what I want to do and create and be in this life. Because here's what, and this is an important thing about relationships that I think we are coming into. Relationships can be the most incredibly inspiring space for our becoming and for supporting who we're becoming in all of these different ways. But, and this is my belief system, if your relationship is your mission in this life, what you think you came here to do, oof, does not bode well for that relationship. Like, another person can't be our purpose, you guys. Like, I truly believe that from like the bottom of my heart. And I think when we are in that space of making another person the center of my universe and my purpose, I think it weighs on the relationship, and it really is us sort of out of alignment with our own individuation process and doing the work that we came into this life on a soul level to do. So that being said, one, this other person can't be my purpose. So if they are sort of the center of what I'm excited about and what I am doing, and it's just them, that's a really good indication that a pivot could be useful. And that pivot can be like, what can I focus on? What can I channel some of this stagnant energy that I'm struggling to sit in? What could I channel it into creatively, and how I can be of service in the world, and how I can be a supportive force for something that means a lot to me? Channel that into that, right? So that's another tool in my toolkit always, is that thing of like, how do I serve? How do I show up and be supportive of someone else in those moments that I really want to focus on something that's making me feel powerless? There's nothing that brings us back into the space of how unbelievably powerful we are than being of service to something or someone else. And so you can channel that energy there. And I find that can be really supportive as well. Yeah. So the sun's coming up, which is so funny because the way that I'm recording the podcast right now, I'm sort of doing it. I don't know the term for that, but where you don't have a lot of studio lights and you're not being sort of fancy with all the things, but just sort of like me and my microphone in my back room and making it happen. But the light from the sun is coming in, and it's sort of creating actually some really beautiful shadows. And I think there's something so potent in trusting in everything. Someone that I love and care about very much says, God bless everything. And I think when we're in those moments of really being challenged by something, what could I do in this moment to look for the way I'm being supported by this, to look for the way that I am being shown my own power? And it just really shifts how I feel in my own energetic field when I say to myself, nothing is ever an accident. Nothing is ever out of alignment with the way that I am being supported in my becoming. And so if there's a way that I can't have access to someone relationally in the way that I believe that I would like to in this moment, beautiful. How am I just trusting so deeply in the fact that I am being supported in some way to become some aspect of myself that I am becoming in ways that I can't quite see yet, but I'll get there, right? And that's always the case. So I hope that was helpful. I know it felt really inspiring to me to get in the space of creation and, to be of service in whatever ways I can. So thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts. Thank you for being here, and I will see you again soon. Oh, on a side note, if you're listening to this, and you know, the relationship intensive, I'm calling Sovereign the couples intensive. If you're listening to this before April 14th and you feel like you are feeling a pull in your relationship dynamic to be supported with, like, yeah, all these things are great, Danae, but like, as this comes up, we could use some support in our day to day as we're parenting. That, all feels well and good, but I'm feeling big feelings that I could use some support in navigating. I would love, love, love to have you join us. And I'll put some information in the show notes about what that is and how you can join us if that's something you're feeling the call to do. And for the rest of you, just thank you so much for being here. I'll see you again soon. Be well.